It was the morning after Christmas, 1996. The decorations were still up. The wrapping paper hadn't been thrown away yet. And somewhere inside a beautiful home in Boulder, Colorado, a 6-year-old girl was missing. Her mother called 911 in a panic. Her voice shook. Her words barely made sense. She was screaming that her daughter was gone, that someone had taken her baby in the middle of the night. But here is where the story gets darker than most people realize. JonBenét Ramsey wasn't just missing, she was already dead, and she had been inside that house the entire time, for nearly 3 decades. This case has haunted America. It has broken families, destroyed reputations, fueled conspiracies, and left an entire nation asking one single question: who killed JonBenét? The FBI investigated. The police pointed fingers. Journalists wrote books. Documentaries were made. Suspects were named, then cleared. And still, after all of it, the answer always seemed just out of reach. But what if the truth was never actually hidden? What if the answer was there the whole time, buried not under secrets, but under the noise of media frenzy, botched investigations, and a world too distracted to look in the right direction? What you are about to hear will change the way you see this entire case forever. Stay with me, because this story does not end where most people think it does. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was 6 years old when she died. 6 years old. She had golden hair, a bright smile, and a laugh that people who knew her say they will never forget. She loved to perform. She loved to dance. And according to everyone who was close to her, she was curious, funny, and full of life in a way that made rooms feel warmer just because she walked into them. She was also a child beauty pageant queen, and that detail, more than almost anything else, would come to define how the world saw her story. Her mother, Patsy Ramsey, had been a beauty queen herself. Miss West Virginia, 1977. Patsy loved fashion, loved pageants, and loved sharing that world with her daughter. JonBenét competed in local and regional pageants. She wore sequin costumes. She performed on small stages in front of judges and crowds. She won titles. She smiled for cameras. And when those images were broadcast across national television after her death, the world didn't just mourn a child. They became fascinated, and in some cases, deeply obsessed, in a way that was complicated, uncomfortable, and entirely human. Her father, John Ramsey, was a successful businessman. The family lived in a 6,500 square foot home in one of Boulder's most prestigious neighborhoods. From the outside, the Ramseys looked like the picture of the American dream: wealth, beauty, success, and a family that seemed to have everything. But what happened on the night of December 25, 1996, would shatter that image completely and permanently. And the investigation that followed would become one of the most mishandled, most controversial, and most heartbreaking criminal cases in the entire history of this country. JonBenét's story matters not because of the pageants, not because of the media circus, and not because of the celebrity obsession it generated. It matters because she was a child, a real child with a real life and a real future. And she deserved justice. For almost 30 years, that justice never came, until now. JonBenét was born on August 6, 1990, in Atlanta, Georgia. She was the youngest child of John and Patsy Ramsey, and from the very beginning, she was described by everyone around her as bright-eyed, fearless, and impossible to ignore. The Ramsey family moved to Boulder, Colorado, when JonBenét was still very young. Boulder was a beautiful, quiet city, the kind of place where people felt genuinely safe, where children played freely outside, where neighbors still knew each other by name. But before the world ever knew JonBenét's name, her mother was already fighting for her life. In 1993, Patsy Ramsey was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. The prognosis was brutal. Doctors weren't sure she would survive. The cancer had spread. The road ahead was terrifying. But Patsy fought. She went through chemotherapy, through surgeries, through the kind of physical and emotional pain that destroys most people from the inside out. And somehow, against every odd, she went into remission. People who knew Patsy say that experience changed her at a cellular level. She came out of it with a burning urgency, a need to live fully and love loudly. to celebrate every single moment while she still could. Some believe that energy poured directly into her investment in JonBenét's pageant career. That the sparkle, the costumes, the performances, they were never really about competition at all. They were about joy. They were about a mother who had stared death in the face and come back desperate to give her daughter every shining, glittering moment she possibly could. JonBenét, for her part, seemed to genuinely love every second of it. Her brother Burke was 4 years older, quiet and reserved where JonBenét was expressive and bold. The family, by every account, was close-knit and deeply loving. Christmas was their favorite time of year. They decorated lavishly, hosted gatherings, and filled their home with the kind of warmth that feels almost cinematic. When you look back at it now, the Christmas of 1996 was supposed to be magical. Instead, it became the last night JonBenét Ramsey was ever seen alive. By late 1996, JonBenét had won multiple pageant titles: Little Miss Colorado, America's Royal Miss, National Tiny Miss Beauty. She wasn't just participating, she was winning. She was genuinely talented, genuinely charismatic, and by every measure, she had a future overflowing with possibility ahead of her. On the evening of December 25th, the Ramseys hosted a small Christmas gathering with close friends. They were planning to travel to Michigan the following morning for a family vacation. The mood was warm. The night felt ordinary in the best possible way. At some point that night, JonBenét went to bed. She never woke up. At 5:52 in the morning on December 26th, Patsy Ramsey called 911. She had gone to wake JonBenét and instead found a handwritten ransom note, 3 pages long, demanding $118,000 for her daughter's safe. Returned. The note warned the family not to contact police. They called police anyway. Officers arrived and searched the house. They found nothing. The investigation began moving, but it moved wrong from the very beginning, and that wrongness would cost everyone dearly. Police allowed the crime scene to be compromised before it was properly processed. Evidence was contaminated. Friends and family members were permitted inside. What should have been a completely sealed investigation. Critical hours were lost. And then, nearly 8 hours after Patsy's frantic 911 call, John Ramsey went to the basement of his own home and found his daughter's body. Hidden behind a door, she was wrapped in a white blanket. She had been strangled. She had suffered a severe skull fracture. A piece of tape had been placed over her mouth. JonBenét Ramsey had been murdered inside her own home. On Christmas night, while her family slept in the rooms above her, the world would never look at this family, this city, or this case the same way again. What followed her death was not justice. It was chaos. It was cruelty. And in many ways, it was a second tragedy layered directly on top of the first. Boulder police almost immediately focused their suspicion on the Ramsey family themselves. John and Patsy were questioned repeatedly, scrutinized relentlessly, and treated by large portions of both law enforcement and the national media as the obvious prime suspects. The ransom note became a central obsession. Handwriting analysts were brought in and deeply divided. Some concluded it matched Patsy's handwriting. Others said it clearly did not. No definitive official conclusion was ever reached, but the damage to public perception was already done. The $118,000 figure, which matched almost exactly the amount of John Ramsey's recent work bonus, raised eyebrows immediately. The note was written on a notepad found inside the house. The pen used was also found inside the house. That meant whoever wrote it had been there, had been comfortable enough to sit down calmly and write 3 full pages in someone else's home. The public did not wait for the evidence to speak. The media had already made up its mind. Patsy Ramsey was put on trial in the court of public opinion for years on end. She was followed by photographers. She was harassed publicly. She was accused openly on national television programs and across tabloid covers. People called for her arrest. People called her a monster. People decided she was guilty long before any evidence supported that conclusion. But here is what too many people conveniently overlooked or simply ignored. In 1997, investigators found DNA evidence on JonBenét's clothing and under her fingernails. Unknown male DNA, DNA that did not match John Ramsey. That did not match Burke Ramsey. That did not match a single family member or friend who was ever tested. There was an intruder. The physical evidence said so, clearly, undeniably, and repeatedly. And yet the investigation continued to circle the family like a storm that refused to move, wasting years, critical, irreplaceable years, during which a real perpetrator remained free. In 2006, Boulder District Attorney Mary Lacey officially and publicly cleared the Ramsey family. Using advanced new DNA technology, she wrote to John Ramsey directly and personally apologized for the years of suspicion that had been wrongly cast upon them and their family. But by then, Patsy Ramsey was already gone. She died of ovarian cancer in June 2006, just months before the official exoneration she had spent years desperately fighting for. The cancer that had once spared her had come back, and this time it did not let go. She spent her final years fighting for her life while simultaneously fighting to protect her name, her dignity, and the truth about what had happened to her daughter. She died never having seen justice for JonBenét. Let that land for a moment. A mother, dying, still fighting for her child, and the world that had accused her never fully apologized. John Ramsey eventually remarried. He has spoken publicly and painfully about the crushing weight of grief, the years of unrelenting public suspicion, and the long, slow, agonizing process of trying to build any kind of life after losing a child in the most violent and public way imaginable. Burke Ramsey grew up largely outside the public spotlight, though he was never fully free of it. In 2016, a CBS documentary openly speculated that Burke may have been responsible for his sister's death. Burke sued CBS for defamation and ultimately settled out of court. The claims made against him have never been supported by a single piece of credible evidence. The Ramsey family paid a price that no family should ever be asked to pay. They lost a child, then they lost their privacy, then their reputations, then Patsy, then years of their lives that could never be returned. The emotional toll of this case has never really been about JonBenét alone. It has always also been about what happens when a broken investigation and a ravenous media machine are pointed directly at real human beings, real grieving people, and allowed to run unchecked. John Ramsey has said in multiple interviews that not a single day passes without him thinking about his daughter, that her laugh still lives inside his memory, that he has slowly made peace with what he cannot change while never stopping the hope that one day someone will finally answer for what was done to her. Nearly 30 years have passed since that December morning. JonBenét would be in her mid-30s today. She might have been a performer, a dancer, a teacher, a mother herself. She might have grown into all the extraordinary things that bright, fearless little girl suggested she was always meant to become. Instead, she is frozen in time, a 6-year-old face on a pageant stage, a name that became a cultural shorthand for everything complicated and painful about fame, childhood, media obsession, and the American appetite for tragedy. But the case has never truly gone cold. Cold case investigators have returned to it multiple times over the decades. DNA technology has advanced beyond anything investigators in 1996 could have imagined. New testing methods now allow for the examination and analysis of genetic material that was previously too degraded or too small to be usable. In recent years, investigative genetic genealogy, the same revolutionary technology that finally identified the Golden State Killer, after more than 40 years, has been formally applied to JonBenét's case. Investigators have used the unknown male DNA profile to build detailed family trees, cross-reference genetic databases, and systematically narrow down the pool of possible suspects to a degree that would have been impossible just 10 years ago. That work is still ongoing, and those closest to it say the answer has never been closer. Few people know exactly how close, but what those investigators have uncovered has fundamentally and permanently changed the shape of this case. Here's what the evidence has always pointed toward, and when an entire generation of media distraction pulled our collective attention away from. For far too long, JonBenét was killed by someone who had direct access to or intimate knowledge of that home. The ransom note was staged. The amount demanded matched a specific, detailed knowledge of the family's private finances. The note was written on paper and with a pen, both found inside the house, meaning the killer had been there before, had moved through that space deliberately and without panic. The unknown male DNA found on JonBenét's clothing is confirmed. It is real, and it has never, not once in nearly 30 years, been matched to any known suspect. In 2023, investigators in Boulder formally confirmed they were actively applying investigative genetic genealogy to this case. They have not publicly named a suspect, but sources familiar with the investigation have indicated that the DNA profile has been significantly narrowed, that the search has now been focused on a specific geographic region, a specific window of time, and a specific type of prior connection to the Ramsey household. The truth the evidence has always suggested is this: JonBenét was killed by an intruder, someone who knew the family's routines, someone who may have had a prior personal connection to that home, someone whose DNA has been sitting quietly in an evidence file for nearly 3 decades, waiting patiently for science to finally catch up to it. The Ramsey family did not kill JonBenét Ramsey. The real killer walked out of that house and disappeared into the night. And for 28 years, the wrong people paid the price, in grief, in public humiliation, in lost years, and in Patsy Ramsey's final breath. That is the truth that should genuinely shock you. Not just that a child was murdered, but that the people who loved her most were blamed, broken, and publicly destroyed, while the actual person responsible was never found. JonBenét deserved better. Her family deserved infinitely better, and justice, even now, is not finished. There's something about this case that simply refuses to release its hold on us. Maybe it is her face, that smile that somehow contains so much life in it even now. Maybe it is the unbearable tragedy of a 6-year-old who had no power over any of this. Not the pageants, not the night she died, not the 30 years of debate and speculation that followed her death. Or maybe it is because JonBenét's story has always been about something far deeper than one unsolved crime. It is about what happens when the world decides it already knows the answer before the evidence has even been collected. It is about how easily we consume real human suffering as entertainment. It is about how grief can be weaponized, how innocence can be annihilated by rumor, and how justice can be delayed so long that the people who needed it most are never alive to see it arrive. Patsy Ramsey went to her grave still fighting for her daughter's truth. That image alone, a mother dying, still trying to clear the name of a child she had already lost, should make every single one of us pause and think seriously about what we truly owe to the people we accuse. JonBenét Ramsey was a child. She was real. She had a future stolen from her on a cold December night by someone who has still not answered for it. But science is patient. Truth is patient. And somewhere out there, in a database, in a family tree, in a DNA match that hasn't been made yet, the answer to this case still exists. It has always existed. We just haven't found the person it belongs to yet. Until that day comes, remember her not as a mystery, not as a tabloid headline, not as a pageant photograph replayed endlessly on true crime channels. Remember her as a 6-year-old girl who loved to dance. That is who JonBenét Ramsey was, and that is who she will always be.